Hello and welcome to Romance Studies 202, Modernism to the Present. Today it is a great pleasure and a great privilege to be talking to the Angolan writer José Eduardo Agualusa, who has been a journalist, has written short stories, but he's probably best known for his novels, including this one, General Theory of Oblivion, which I think is the one which won the award, the Dublin Award, the Society of Reluctant Dreamers. But today, in this conversation, we're going to focus on this book, which is translated as The Book of Chameleons, or Vendedor de Passados in the original Portuguese. So thank you so much, José Eduardo, if I may call you that, for being here. I thought my first question, I just called you an Angolan writer, and obviously lots of your books, including The Book of Chameleons, have a lot to say about Angola's post-colonial history, the last 25, 30 or more years of Angolan history. But you're also perhaps a well-known, one of the most well-known African writers. And then on the other hand, in many of your books, there's connections with Brazil and Portugal, in other words, the Lusophone world. So I wonder whether you consider yourself as an Angolan writer, as an African writer, a Lusophone writer, or perhaps none of those, or all of them?
Well, I think I am a writer from Angola. I'm a writer from Angola. I'm an Angolan from Huambo. So I'm Angolan that speak Portuguese as a mother tongue, and that's it. And now I'm living in Mozambique, in the north of Mozambique.
And in the Book of Chameleons, of course, there's also the sense of Southern Africa, right? The characters, some of the characters they move up and down through Angola, but also to South Africa itself. Another character in I think the Society of the Reluctant Dreamers moves to Mozambique, in fact, as well. Your books have been so. The question of as a writer who writes in Portuguese, as you do, but you've been translated into many languages. Almost all your books are available in English, but also, I don't know, French and German and Italian, I think. I wonder, do you feel that you write for readers, first of all, in Angola or in Portuguese, or are you also conscious of the fact that these are books that are nowadays going to be translated into other languages?
I think the majority of the African writers these days, we write knowing that a large part of our readers are outside of our country. So we are like a kind of translators also, because we translate not words, but we translate worlds. Yeah. So yeah, when we write, we are conscious that a large part of our readers are not in our country, so in Angola, for instance, yes. So when I write, I have this idea, this clear image. So I try to write in a way that any reader can understand. Yeah. But anyway, Angola is a very complex country, with a very different language and culture. So even inside Angola, when I am writing about one, for instance, I must be conscious that not all Angolans would understand everything. So even inside Angola, I must have this art to tell a story to a more large audience.
Do you think your books are read differently or interpreted differently?
Of course.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, of course. Yes. Everywhere. I mean, every book's everywhere. You know, a book is a very complex entity also. Mm-hmm. So an Angolan from Huambo can read a book of mine in a way, and a Portuguese or a Brazilian we read another way. That's inevitable, yes. So yeah, that's what it is. I like very much to listen my readers everywhere because I learn a lot about my books, because sometimes people find things that are there in the books, but even me, I didn't look, I didn't saw these things. So yeah, it's like that. The same book is I can say this in English. Nobody reads the same book.
Uh-huh.
Nobody. You know, even you, when you read a book when you are a teenager, then you read the same book when you are an old guy. It's a different book. It must be a different book. So a book is not finished. A book exists when somebody start reading the book and start create inside their minds, start create this book again and again and again.
In the case of the Book of Chameleons, uh, in the way in which this book is recreated and becomes a new book, I'm particularly interested in the way in which you and your translator, Daniel Hahn, decided
Yeah,
to come up with a title in English, which is very different. It's not a literal translation of the title in
yeah.
Portuguese.
It was very funny because I remember that Daniel and come to me, or I go to meet him in London. I don't remember quite well, but I remember that we review all the book in just 2 days or something, and the other days we spend all time discussing the title. Okay, and he told me, well, doesn't work in English, this title, O Vendedor de Passados. And also the publisher house doesn't like the title in Portuguese. So we try a lot of different titles, okay? And I remember that at the end, we say, okay, could be the Book of Chameleons. And the first review of the book was a very nice review. But I remember at the end, the guy say something like, this is not the right title. It's nothing to do with the Portuguese title. And he start discussing about chameleons and geckos. And the name of this guy was something lizard.
Uh-huh.
I can't remember, John Lizard or something like that. So I call Daniel and I say, look, there's a very authorized opinion because it's a lizard
Mhm.
talking about chameleons. And it's okay, the book of chameleons, because yeah, this guy, this Felix, it's like he's creating chameleons, So I can understand the title, but I can't say I'm very, very happy with the title. But when you translate a book, it's like that. I mean, I remember in German it was the same thing. The guy called me. It's a very nice translator, and he called me saying we can't have this title in German. So I have a title. It's uh, the laugh of the gecko or
Uh-huh.
something like that.
Mhm.
And I tell him I like very much, but there's a book, a very known, well-known novel, Brazilian novel, O Sorriso do Lagarto, great Brazilian writer João Baldo Ribeiro. And he says, oh, what? That's a problem, but let me see if this book has the same title in German. And then he called me again and said, no, it's okay, because in German, this book have another title. So I know it's a fight when you have a book to find the right title in other language. It's not so easy, and I really believe Daniel is a very sensitive writer. Also, a translator is also must be a writer, and sometimes he creates very, very, very good titles in English, much better than in Portuguese.
Mhm. And I like it. It's appropriate also because back to what you were saying about you can never read the same book twice, or everyone reads the same a different book. You know, the book is a bit chameleon-esque, and maybe a writer has to be a bit of a chameleon too.
Yeah, must be. A writer must be uh, everything, you know. A writer must be all men, because when you are writing, you must be a woman, you must be a dog, whatever, a gecko,
Mhm.
you know. So a writer is a multiple entity, you know. Must be when you are a writer, you must be the others. You must be everywhere, everybody.
Now, the Gecko in this novel is also a writer, or is the reincarnation of a writer.
Yes.
And you were just talking about a Brazilian writer, but in this case, it's the Argentine writer Jorge Luis Borges. You seem to be particularly interested in or influenced by Latin American literature, perhaps Borges
Yes.
in particular. I wonder if you could say what interests you in a writer such as Borges and how he might have influenced the Book of Chameleons and why you decided, you say in an interview at the end of the English translation, you were going to give Borges a second chance. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that.
Well, Borges was very important for me as a writer. I discovered Borges when I was a teenager, a very young guy. I was studying in Lisbon, agriculture, and a friend of mine offered me fictions of Borges, and for me it was a great discovery. I remember very well that day. I like Borges because, okay, because of the language in first place, but also because the way he leads with the absurd inside the society and the fantastic also, okay? And that's something that we have in Angola everywhere, you know. So and then I read Garcia Marques, I read Cortázar, I read some Brazilian writers also. And it was the same environment, this magical, this fantastic way. It's our reality, you know. It's not. It's for me. It's difficult to say it's realism fantastic because it's our reality. It's like that.
Hmm.
You know, even here in Mozambique, I'm living here in Mozambique now, and I go outside and I find this environment everywhere. It's our daily life.
And in the Book of Chameleons, the fantastic or the absurd is at the center of the story in lots of ways. Again, you've got this character Felix Ventura who invents pasts. Again, that's the hence the original Portuguese title. A past that come to seem more real than the real pasts of the characters for whom he invents pasts. And then there's something absurd about the gecko as a narrator. But also, there's the threat of violence, and at the end, or near the end, that violence it erupts, and it has to do with that complex and quite brutal history in Angola of revolution and then a protracted civil war with many different countries involved. How do you see the relationship between that sense of absurdity on the one hand and that kind of grim reality of a quite brutal history?
Well, as you know, Angola had a very long history of violence, civil war, long civil war. And even now, Angola is in peace, but the daily life of the majority of the people are very rough, very violent. So you can't write about Angola without that, you know. But at the same time, we have this joy and the fantastic everywhere. So if you write about Angola, you must write about that. It's no, not. It's our life.
In,
It's just like that. It's our life. It's every time I'm writing, I know that outside my office, things are much more interesting than my books. Reality is much more interesting than my books. Sometimes we must cut the wings of the reality for the readers believe in it.
mhm.
Because sometimes the reality is so fantastic and so exuberant. You say it in English.
So exuberant.
So
Oh, yes, yes.
yes, that people doesn't believe you if you put it in a book. So sometimes you have really just to cut the wings to people believe in our books.
In this context, I wonder what you think is the role of literature or the role of the writer. Again, in lots of your books, the Book of Comedians is one. You remind or you inform, perhaps for a non-Angolan audience, or you remind for an Angolan audience something about that reality and something about that history. I wonder if you, to what extent you see, and again, other books as well return to that history, whether you see your role, the role of the writer, or the role of literature as, in part at least, a sort of, I don't know, testimonial, maybe that's not the word, a reminder or a return to things that sometimes perhaps they might rather forget.
Yes, I believe so also. Yeah. I think a book can be a lot of different things, but one of this is to remind people, yes, to put together and to put people thinking about these questions also.
Mhm.
A good book must disquiet you, you know?
Mhm. I'm also interested in maybe you can talk more specifically about the Book of Comedians and the roles of the dreams. So
Okay.
there are a number of dreams. The book is punctuated by dreams, and I wonder if you could say a little bit about how you chose to and what happens. Those are the moments in which the gecko is able to. Well, we learn more about the gecko, and at some points the gecko seems to be able to communicate only perhaps
Yeah.
through dreams.
Yeah. That's it. In this book, in particular, it's a way that I imagine the gecko can communicate with the Felix Ventura. Yeah, they meet together inside the dreams of Felix. Yeah, so they can communicate. But to dream for me, it's very important as a writer. I mean, it's part of my job. Even this book start with a dream. I was in Berlin with a grant, a literary grant, and one day I go to bed and I dream with this man, Felix Ventura, and he offered me a card that says, "Offer your children the best past." And I wake up and I have this idea, this guy, this character. And so I start to write a short story first. And then I wrote this short story. I published this short story in a Portuguese newspaper. And then I understood that this character could be bigger, and I start to write the novel. So it begins with a dream, and it happens with me a lot, a lot. Sometimes I dream with just some words. Sometimes I dream with the title of the books, and sometimes I dream all the plot, all the story.
So dreams can be sites of creativity like that. That's a fascinating story.
Uh,
But dreams can also be nightmares. Again, I'm intrigued. Now this is
yeah.
more to do with the other book, The Society of Reluctant Dreamers. Sometimes you might be reluctant to dream because of what the dream or what the dream reveals, and that's the Freudian notion, right? That the dreams can tell us something about the unconscious that we would rather have repressed. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the ambivalence of the dreaming, maybe in general, but also in the Book of the Chameleons or in your other books.
I think I really believe that dreamers prepare you to the reality. Dreams are part of our reality. They are not fiction. I mean, when you are, sometimes I wake up and I'm crying, tears, because I dream with something very sad. And my sadness, it's not a fiction, it's very real. When you cry dreaming, it's not fiction, it's very real for you, it's very painful. So dreams are part of our reality. And I really believe one of the functions of dreaming is to prepare you to the reality. Sometimes you dream something that you are very afraid because you must prepare yourself to that situation. And some things, like me, I dream what I need to dream.
The story of how of how this book came to you, or Felix Ventura came to you in a dream, is fascinating. I'm fascinated by the fact that it's Felix Ventura who was the first character who came to you. At what point did Eulalio or the Gecko enter into the story? And how did you, at what point did you decide also that we would see things from the Gecko's point of view?
Yeah, Gecko appears late. I remember that. I start writing the book, and I have I have trying to find the narrator. The most important thing when you start to write a book is to find the voice, the right voice. This is the most difficult thing. Sometimes you write a lot and doesn't work at all because this is not the right voice. When you find the voice, you have the book.
Mm-hmm.
And with this book, it was like that. In the beginning, I have not the right voice. I didn't, and then I start to think I need a guy, I need a voice, I need a narrator that is like a small God, that can see all things from up. And so I look at a gecko, and I understand must be a gecko because geckos are everywhere at home. There are here at this kind of places in Angola a lot, in Mozambique also. And I remember I travel one. I traveled to Malaysia. When I was younger, I was an ecologist, okay, and I go to Malaysia to be part of a ecological meeting, with ecological movements, and we go to a forest in Malaysia, and at night I wake up at my room with somebody laughing. And I suppose I at first I think that some colleague of us that are trying to do something with us, but then I discovered this gecko. So this gecko that laugh, it really exists. It's really the only character in my book is the gecko,
Uh-huh.
the only true character. The gecko exists, a gecko like that laugh like a human being.
Uh-huh. Wow.
So when I decided to have this character, at the same time I remember that gecko I met in Malaysia, and so it's very fast. It develops very fast.
So it's a Malaysian gecko that gets transplanted to Angola, to
It's a
Africa.
Malaysian gecko, yeah, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Then when I finished my book, there was a Angolan biologist that told me, wrote a letter to me saying, how you find this gecko? Because in the desert, in Namib desert, there's also a gecko like that that can laugh.
Wow.
I didn't know. Uh,
I'm fascinated by the fact I had no idea that you were once a ecologist. What? Because I'm interested about the way what this book might have to say about the relationship between humans and animals. I mean, that's the central relationship, right? The relationship between Felix Ventura, the human,
uh,
and Eulalia, or who, the person who ends up, the gecko who ends up getting the name Eulalia, or even perhaps about the relationship between humans and nature more generally.
I don't know. I think I'm a kind of animist. You know, I really believe that our ancestors are everywhere and can talk with you with the animal voices, and everywhere, every living being is linked to every living being. You know. So some people told me that there's a lot of animals, there's a lot of animal voices in your books. I didn't realize it. It's not something conscient. It just happens because there's a lot of animals around me. And I try to pay attention to life, to all forms of life.
So, given this, and perhaps this will be, we're beginning to run out of time. I wonder about the ending of the book. You kill off the gecko. You
Yeah.
your narrator is killed by a scorpion very suddenly. It's part of a whole train of rather sudden interruptions or and reverses towards the end of the book. I wonder why did you kill a gecko narrator? And if you could say a little bit more about those reversals and interruptions.
You know, I remember quite well when I decided to kill the gecko because in my mind, there's a story that my father told me when I was a child about a gecko that was killed by a scorpion. So I had this idea because when I was a child, I listened this story. So it's something that came to me when I was writing.
Hmm. And the reversals at the end when we realize that, oh, I don't know, the guy who has been given the identity, seems like a foreigner, bookman, turns out, in fact, not to be, and to be very much part of this Angolan history. The kind of revenge plot, when the story becomes a story of revenge. Could you say a little bit more about how that happened? And it moves, I suppose, from a story of Ventura and the gecko, we move to this other kind of family drama too.
Yeah. Well, this is a link to the history, the political history of Angola. Now, this very violent history of Angola. We all lived that in Angola, these very hard times, and a lot of my friends, some of my closest friends, were in prison, were killed. Some when they are just teenagers. One of my friends was put in prison. 40 is 14 years old. Is almost a child. So all this, I write because I need to understand the other. I need to understand why people do bad things and all of that. And when you live in a country as Angola, it's so violent with this history, so violent. You really needed to understand the others, and that's why I write. I start writing to understand myself inside this country, and then to understand the others around me. And until now, it's the same. I'm still writing because I need to understand the others. And to write, it helps me to understand. Yeah. To read also, to read books also.
I was going to say this is a perfect place to end, I think. You know, I think we read also to understand or try to imagine the others and what it is to be other, whether it's Gecko or whether it's,
Yeah.
an enemy. And I think your books are a fantastic contribution to that attempt to understand the others. José Eduardo
Thank you.
Agualusa, thank you so much for your
Thank you.
time
Thank you.
and for your thoughts. It's been a great pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.